Okay, today we are going to be solving polynomials with imaginary or irrational roots. The first one we have is x cubed minus 4x squared plus x minus 4 equals 0. And we go through first and list all our possible roots. And that's where you take the factors of your last divided by the factors of your first. Since this is a 1, it kind of makes it easy. You have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, and plus or minus 4. Because each of those divided by 1 is just itself. And so you will go through and test them one at a time. I have already done that. And when I plug in the 4, the positive 4, it works. So you do the positive 4 store x, and then your enter. And then you typed in the equation, and it got you a 0. So that lets me know what I need to divide by. And so I am going to divide by an x minus 4 because it was the positive 4 that worked. And I could just go ahead and put 3 here instead of 4 boxes. I know it's going to give a remainder of 0, but out of habit I just went ahead and did the 4 columns. And x cubed divided by x is x squared. X squared times negative 4 is going to give me that negative 4x squared. And that happens to be what I'm looking for. So the next column is going to be a 0, x squared, which is going to make this 0x squared. Then I'm looking for an x. So that would make this x. X divided by x is 1. 1 times a negative 4 is negative 4, giving us a remainder of 0, because this is a negative 4 here. So that means at this point I have it factored out to where it is x minus 4 times x squared plus 1 equals 0. I need to either factor or somehow solve what that would be. If it is just a binomial like this, you can set it equal to 0 and solve. And so when I take the square root of a negative 1, it's going to make that an I, and so it's a plus or minus I. So my factors on this problem are x equals 4, because that's what we found this one to be, an I, and a negative I. On tonight's homework, you are going to have to list those individually. And remember, if you can't set it equal to 0 like this, you could use a quadratic formula. If you need to, go back and look at your notes for those. Let's go ahead and do another one. So, again, we're going to take the plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, and plus or minus 4. And so, again, I've already plugged this in, but you would go through each of those and try them and see which one gives you the 0 by using your calculator. Remember the number, store x, and then type in the equation, and whichever one gives you 0 is correct. And 2 when I store 2 in for x, it resulted in a 0. So that means 2 is equal to the x. So that's one of them. And when I come up with a factor, it's going to be x negative 2. And so I'm going to go ahead and divide. And I need 2 rows. And you need 3 columns. If you use 4, it's okay, just like I did the last one. Because it should divide evenly. If it doesn't divide evenly, you did something wrong, go back and try again. So x cubed divided by x gives me an x squared. X squared times negative 2 is negative 2x squared. For my next spot, which is at negative 4x, I need to add in a negative 2x squared. So negative 2x squared divided by x gives me negative 2x. Negative 2x times a positive 2 gives me a positive 4x. And my goal for this one is to create that positive 2. So that means negative 2x divided by x is going to give me a negative 2. Negative 2 times a negative 2 is a positive 4. And that matches perfectly. So that means my remainder is 0, which means I don't have anything left over. That means my 2 things that when I factor this, I came up with are x minus 2 times x squared minus 2x minus 2. Unfortunately, that is not something that I could set equal to 0 and so on the second one and just quickly come up with a factor, because there is this little middle term. And it is not something that can factor. So that means I am going to use quadratic formula for this problem. So that first polynomial factored into x minus 2, x squared minus 2x minus 2. I am only going to be focused in on the second parenthesis to use on the quadratic formula. That means my a is 1, my b is negative 2, and my c is negative 2. And the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. But remember that we always find our discriminant first. So this part here. So b squared minus 4ac. So that would be the negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 2. So that's 4 minus a negative 8, which is 4 plus 8, which is 12. And so we're going to plug that into the quadratic formula. Negative b is opposite b, so that in this case would be a positive 2 plus or minus the square root of that 12 we just found divided by 2 times a, which is 1 in this case. So 12 is not a perfect square, so it means I can't take the square root of it, but inside of a 12 has some factors that we can bring out. It's divisible by 2, which leaves us 6, which is divisible by 2, which leaves us 3. So we have a set of 2's that will come out of that 12. So we have a 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3, all divided by 2. And remember, we have to look at the number in front of the plus or minus, the number in front of the square root, and the denominator. And if all three of them are divisible by the same thing, we can simplify it down. And they're all divisible by 2, leaving us a 1 plus or minus the square root of 3 over 1, which we don't have to write the over 1. So now let's think back up to the beginning. We had that x plus 2 from the original. And now we have 2 more from down here. So our final answer is where we combine all of those together. So x minus 2 created us a positive 2. And then we have to write these individually. 1 plus the square root of 3, comma, 1 minus the square root of 3.